What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Soul Good podcast. You are listening to episode number 3. This is episode number 3. So, thank you for tuning in. I really do appreciate you. My name is Britani Rose, and I am your host. And it is a pleasure to have you here with me today. I'm really excited to be able to continue this series and share some information. If you haven't had a chance to tune in yet, we have had some fun talking about self-love. We talked about accountability. We talked about accountability. And today we're talking about something that excites me as well. But before we get into the topic, I want to just share with you guys how I'm doing and some milestones about this journey that I'm on so far. Being on episode number 3 feels really good, quite honestly. Just considering that it took me a while to even just start episode 1. So I'm really excited to continue to push through my feelings of like nervousness and inadequacy and all of those things and actually see myself making it happen and loving the process. So far, I have learned a lot about podcasting. I've learned a lot about how to podcast and all the behind the scenes like editing and like how to enhance your sound equipment, platforms to get sounds. So there's just so many different elements of this journey that I didn't expect to be experiencing, and I am. And I'm super thankful, I guess is just what I'm trying to say, because I didn't necessarily know how I was going to feel about this experience, but I'm just really grateful that in accomplishing this and each episode that I record and experience, I'm learning something new about the information that I'm sharing. I'm learning something new about myself, and it truly is like a growth experience just for me all in all. So I just wanted to kind of update you guys on where I'm at in this process and how it feels. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm ready to get into what we are going to be talking about today. And I'm super excited because, this is a new concept for me. The topic of today's conversation is something that I have been flirting with for a very short time. And so I'm a little nervous to actually like teach it, but I'm teaching it as a student. We all in class together on this one in all of these episodes, truthfully, because all of this is just a learning experience, if you will. So without any more hesitance, I am going to introduce the guest for today's episode, y'all. Are you ready? Are you ready? Emotional intelligence. Yay! Wow. 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 Such a pleasure to have emotional intelligence in the building with us today. This guest is quite intimidating, if I don't say so myself, just because where they do that at? Like, what is it? What does it mean? That's what I think of when I initially just hear the word emotional intelligence. It sounds very sexy. And if I might add, I'm trying to see what that be like. So I'm going to get into the definition of emotional intelligence. It's something that I feel like we are kind of learning about more as a society. I hear people speaking on emotional intelligence more and trying to like understand what it means, how to become more emotionally intelligent. So I'm super excited to actually talk about this today because it's something that I've personally had to, I have had to study. I've had to really understand what it means to be intelligent with your emotions. And yeah, it's been a difficult thing, but we rocking. So what is emotional intelligence, right? So these definitions, I actually have 2 because there was one that was a little bit more like expanded, and then there was one that was a little bit more simplistic. And I was like, why not do both? Like, why not do both? Okay, just in case you like a little long wind. And then for the people who just like it short, sweet, and to the point, I have 2 definitions for you. Okay. So the first definition that I got is from a publication on helpguide.org. And they define emotional intelligence as the capacity to comprehend, utilize, and regulate personal emotions in a constructive manner. Now, if you've been tuning in to the show, you already know that I just don't feel like definitions hit the first time when you read them. I feel like you have to really like speak it again, say it again, process it, and understand it. And so I'm going to take it back one time for you. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to comprehend, utilize, and regulate personal emotions in a constructive manner. Okay. And so this one is a little bit long-winded because it also speaks to the benefits of emotional intelligence. And so it has 4 benefits listed with this definition that I'd like for you to hear. The first benefit of having the capacity to comprehend, utilize, and regulate personal emotions in a constructive manner is that number 1, it can aid in reducing stress levels. Number 2, help you communicate effectively. Number 3, it can help you demonstrate empathy towards others. And number 4, it can help you while conquering challenges and resolving conflicts. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I love that definition because where do they sell that? Hearing all those benefits, reducing stress, communicating effectively, having empathy towards others, and being able to resolve conflict. Like where do they sell that? Okay, because I struggle with quite a few of those things and would love to be able to experience those benefits. Okay. But for some other folks who just want a simpler understanding of what emotional intelligence is, Mental Health America describes it simply as the ability to manage both your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. Now, I like that definition because it doesn't just talk about your own emotions. It doesn't just talk about the responsibility of managing your own emotions with emotional intelligence, but it talks about the ability to understand and comprehend the emotions of people around you as well. And I think that that is very, very important, along with your ability to understand your own emotions, right? Is like the capacity to be able to understand and comprehend other people's emotions outside of you, because everyone has emotions. They're not something that you can turn off. They're not something that you can run away from. So the ability to be able to understand not only your own, but those around you, I can totally see how you would be able to benefit in areas of like demonstrating empathy and resolving conflict, right? And so now that we have a little bit of an understanding of what emotional intelligence is, I'm going to share with you the ways that I struggled, because when I was reading those benefits and when I was reading those definitions, I had too many areas where I was struggling. Like I'm sitting here trying to figure out, okay, like in what ways did I lack emotional intelligence and how was that affecting my life? Honey, it was 1, 2, 3. Like I had bullet points because I'm telling you, this is not my area of expertise, like at all. And truthfully, it's only been like a couple of years. I would say the last 2 years that I've even really known what emotional intelligence is. And like in the last year, kind of like 6 months, I've really been drilling down on trying to actually practice emotional intelligence, not like knowing what it is, but actually practicing it and allowing the benefits of it to benefit, like for real, because it does if you apply the tools that you learn. So one of the first ways that lack of emotional intelligence was affecting me was like I really just had a hard time empathizing with others. And, it's not fun to say, it's not fun to admit, but it's the truth. And so I'm going to be real about that and share how even now, even to this day, like I have to work on that, because I am somebody who tends to allow my emotions to overcome me and my circumstances, and that drastically impedes on my ability to understand and comprehend the emotions of others outside of me, because I'm so consumed with my own. And so not being able to have compassion for others, not being able to just hold space for them and accept their emotions really made me come off cold. It made me come off dismissive. It made me come off careless, truthfully. And I saw firsthand how that was affecting my relationships and how it was affecting the people around me that I was dealing with, right? And so when it comes to not being able to recognize other people's emotions, this is segueing right into problem number 2 that I had with emotional intelligence. And that was that I could not communicate. Like, it's weird to think that I couldn't communicate. Somebody who literally has a podcast and is talking couldn't communicate. Well, and I'm going to tell you that's because talking is very different than communicating, like effectively, right? I can talk all day and do hun, period. I can talk all day, but it does not mean that I'm communicating in an effective way that is getting across and that is actually beneficial to me, right? And so emotional intelligence is the ability to communicate effectively and make sure that your communication is actually working for you and not against you in situations. But I found myself at a place where my trauma and everything, kind of all the damaging parts of me just really would not allow me to communicate with others the way I wanted to. I was very fearful of speaking up for myself at one point in time. Things would happen to me, or I would experience things with people in my relationships, whether it was mistreatment or things I didn't feel really like fair or I didn't like. And I would just keep all that in. I would keep it into myself. I wouldn't communicate to people how it was making me feel. And in turn, what was happening is by me keeping things inside, by me not telling people how they were making me feel, by me bottling up my emotions, what was happening was that I grew resentful, right? So like naturally, when you keep things in and you keep stuff to yourself, what happens is it doesn't get resolved. And so when things don't get resolved, you feel some type of way. Like you might be trying to put it to rest by not saying something, by not like putting life into the situation. But what you're actually doing is you're just letting it cook up inside of you. And so you grow upset that other people aren't hearing you, or other people aren't respecting you, or other people aren't responding the way you necessarily want them to respond. But how can they when you aren't communicating? And so that's something that was affecting me in all the ways. I would be like having a hard time specifically speaking up and asking for help. That was something that was just really, really, really difficult for me. And part of having emotional intelligence is having the ability to speak up and advocate for yourself. And so not being able to communicate was very damaging to not only me, but my relationships as well. Now, this third thing, this is something that somebody else told me, and I had no idea that it was affecting me this way, but I had a boss at my job, and I had a situation that happened at my job, and he used a term that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to tell you what it means, because when he told it to me, I said, say what now? So, but yeah, I'm at work one day and I had this situation with my coworker, and she kind of blew up at me. And at the time I was very young and I wanted to fly off the handle and go off on her, but I obviously didn't do that because I didn't want to lose my job. So instead of having that moment where I was able to just talk and calm myself and gather myself, because I wasn't very emotionally intelligent, the first thing I did was call my boss, and I just was like pouring my heart out to this man, crying. I was like, she just came in here and was like screaming at me and like, I don't know what to do. And I'm just so upset. Like, why did she feel this way? And I will never forget. He was so calm and he was just sitting there on the phone like, well, Britani, I want to tell you something right now. You are getting emotionally hijacked. And I said, what's that? Because I didn't know, right? Like I had no idea what emotionally hijacked is. So from Emotional Intelligence Magazine, they have it described as a term coined by Daniel Goleman, which describes when the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with emotional processing, takes over standard reasoning. Okay. The main job of the amygdala is to respond to a threat. Without regard for your physical location, when the amygdala senses danger, it makes a split decision to flee, fight, or freeze. Okay. And so I don't know what I was experiencing in that moment, but what I know is that I was not myself. Right. And so what he told me was like, well, what's happening is that you're taking on her emotions. Like she was the one crying and screaming and throwing a fit. And now here you are crying and screaming and throwing a fit in response to what she did or how she showed up. Right. And so I had to step back in that moment and think like, damn, he's spitting. Cause like, I really wasn't tripping before she came in here, you know, like I was fine. I might've been having a great day. And here she comes feeling how she's feeling, which you're totally entitled to, right? Like she could be having a bad day, but hearing that term, getting emotionally hijacked and learning that term was a game changer for me, because it was when I recognized that I had a habit of allowing other people to dictate my emotions. So like just being aware of that, right? Like understanding like, oh, this is your mess, right? Like this is you. This is your emotions, and I can hold space for you, but I don't have to take that on, right? And so that was a big one for me. Like that was a huge one, because I'm very like emotionally reactive. And so if you're coming at me on 10, I'm coming at you on 10. You know, that's just how it is. That's how it was. So recognizing that has been very helpful for me when it comes to my healing journey, right? And then number 4, like, y'all, this was and is still my biggest issue when it comes to emotional intelligence. And that is that having a lack of emotional intelligence has made me unable and unwilling to diffuse conflict. Shots fired. Because boy, you are talking to me. You are talking to me. Like, this is where I have to talk about myself in a way that, you know, it's just being accountable, right? Like what we talked about. But anytime I was involved in conflict with others, my go-to, zip it. I'm not talking. Like I'm literally not saying anything. And for a long time, I didn't understand why I was not able to communicate during conflict, right? Like I didn't understand like why I couldn't have healthy conversations during conflict. It was always, I'm going to cuss you out. I'm tell you about yourself, all those things that truly would not help the situation. It would only make things worse. You're coming to me, making me feel some type of way. I'm going to make you feel some type of way, period. And I would find myself in situations with people where they're calling me out on my shit. Like, let's just be real, right? I remember I was in a relationship once, and my partner at the time and I were having some very difficult issues with communication. And so we ended up going to therapy, and, you know, we're not together anymore, but praise God that we went to therapy, because it was during those sessions that I understood that I had a communication issue, because she was letting me know how my lack of being even willing to just speak and communicate. And even if it's just speaking up and saying, hey, I want to talk, but I'm scared right now. I don't know what to say. I want to make sure that we at least talk though. Like, how do you feel? Right. I couldn't do any of those things, because in those moments, what was happening is like my whole nervous system is just shutting down, because I'm afraid of something right now. I don't know what it is, but it's coming off to my partner as if I don't care. And learning that was like really eye-opening, because it's not that I didn't care. It was totally a me issue in those moments, but I wasn't able to recognize that. I wasn't even able to acknowledge that in those moments. And it made the other person, the other party, sad, made them feel alone when we had conflict, made them feel like I wasn't invested, right? And so that's still something that I struggle with till this day, because I recognize that all of that was not that I didn't want to communicate. It's that I didn't know how. And so there was a lot of shame attached to not knowing how to show up in those moments. And I kind of talked about that a little bit last episode, just about accountability. But when somebody calls you on your shit and they're telling you like, hey, this is how you're affecting me, that doesn't necessarily feel good, right? And so hearing feedback or getting feedback about how it's making somebody feel, instead of being open and expressing myself, instead of validating their feelings, instead of making them feel seen and heard, I would just shut down. And I recognized that it was something that I could not do for somebody else because it was something that I didn't really necessarily experience as a child, right? Being validated, feeling heard, and feeling seen. I think a lot of people, especially like in the Black culture, we are raised with like be seen, not heard type of philosophy, and that does not really help us feel validated, or it doesn't even encourage us to speak up and share how we feel with our caretakers because you're not to be heard, right? And so recognizing how that was affecting me and being willing to do the work to just even understand how I could get better was very important as for this healing journey. So segueing into how to become more emotionally intelligent, right? Like, first of all, let me just say, emotionally intelligent is kicking my ass. Like that term in and of itself is kicking my ass, just saying it, but we're gonna get through. We move. Emotional intelligence, practicing this, learning what it is truly an everyday struggle for me. Like I said, I'm one of those people that I'm very emotionally reactive. And so not being able to properly express my emotions is something that feels difficult. Also, managing my emotions feels very difficult as well. So I choose to lean into the part that allows me to understand myself more. And that is working on controlling my emotions, right? Because our bodies are revolving doors for emotions. They're going to be coming and going, ebbing and flowing are the rest of our life. Like they're not something that you can turn off, and they're very real. Like emotions need to be respected. Emotions need to be honored. Emotions need to like have space held for them because they're signals, right? Like when you're experiencing things and you're happy and you're feeling content and satisfied, that's your body's way of telling you that you feel good, that you're in a good space, that you enjoy your present and current experience, right? On the flip side, when you're sad, when you're feeling disappointed, right? Like that's your body telling you something as well. Your body's telling you that you may need a little more attention and affection right now, that you aren't feeling your best, and that your body is feeling maybe some disappointment or sadness, and that's okay, right? But emotions need to be acknowledged. And so part of these tools that I'm going to give you, all of them are very practical, and I want you to take them step by step in phases of how to implement these things into your life, right? So there are 5 key ways that you can increase your level of emotional intelligence. And these are all the ways that I really work on this on a day-to-day basis and hold space for myself emotionally and grow emotionally with others. So number 1 is to practice observing how you feel. This is something that I feel is kind of hard to do because depending on the emotions, it can be a little difficult to sit with yourself and hold space for your emotions. But being very intentional about this is so helpful, and it's something that can help you grow more in tune with yourself, which is the entire goal of emotional intelligence, right? Like you are trying to learn yourself. And in order to learn yourself, in order to learn how you feel, in order to become comfortable with your emotions, you got to sit with them. Like you cannot run, you can't get on the phone, you can't do any of those things. Like we need to have some space throughout our day where we're acknowledging how we feel, right? And so you can do that in a plethora of ways. One of the ways that you can do that is through meditation. You can do breath work, journaling, or yoga. My go-to is something simple like journaling. I love to wake up in the morning. First thing that I do is just write out how I feel, waking up and having some time for myself to just hold space for how I feel. And acknowledge what's going on the inside of me. So I start my journal entry with something like, this morning I feel blah, 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 right? And there's no pressure to feel a certain way. This is just simply me taking the time to start my day by observing how I feel, what's on my mind, what I want to get off my heart, right? And that really just makes me feel comfortable with those emotions. It helps me to be okay and at peace with experiencing emotions and feeling certain ways. And so the second thing that's really helpful with building emotional intelligence is questioning your own opinions. Now, what I mean by that is that we are subjected to different opinions and our own every single day. If you have a Twitter, if you have a social media account, you're seeing different opinions every single day. Now, this can be a good and a bad thing, but it's definitely a good thing when it comes to emotional intelligence, because what it does is allow space for you to challenge your own opinions on certain things, right? And it's not about proving yourself wrong, but more so it's about creating space for new perspectives. Because if you're trying to grow into an emotionally intelligent person, right, one of the things that's important, and we talked about that with this definition, is that it's not just about your emotions, it's about the understanding and being able to accept the emotions of people around you. And so by increasing your capacity for other opinions, by challenging your own thoughts and perspectives, you're now able to kind of respect where somebody else may land in their truth, in their reality, apart from yours, without being offended, without feeling disrespected, without feeling slighted, right? Because we want to hold space for both our emotions and others. It's not about right or wrong. It's about truth and truth, right? And so the third way that we grow when it comes to emotional intelligence is remembering that you always have a choice. Did you hear what I said? Turn that shit up. You have a choice. Self-regulation is so beautiful. Like, now that I'm in a space where I pride myself on like regulating my emotions, I'm telling you right now, it is the sexiest thing that I have ever done. Like, truthfully, it's the sexiest thing I've ever done, because I am one of those people, like, you're telling me, remember, I have a choice. Yeah, my choice is to cuss your ass out. That's what my choice is. I'm going to cuss you out. And 10 times out of 10, that's going to be my route, right? Like, that's the person that I have been in the past. Because up here in my mind, that clap back, it has to come out. Like, it can't just stay in my mind. That needs to be heard. I'm one of those people who, my words are very powerful. I know that if I say something positive to somebody, I could make them cry. I know that if I say something negative to somebody, I can make them cry, right? And so this is not something I'm proud of. It's just something that I've observed about myself, because words are powerful, right? And we can use them for our benefit or we can use them for our detriment, right? And while cussing people out, yes, it feels good sometimes. It's not necessarily always the best thing for me. And so being able to recognize, like, oh my God, like, I have a choice. You mean I don't have to cuss you out? Like, do I want to? Yes, but I don't have to. Recognizing that has been, I'm telling you, such an energy conserver for me. And when I find myself in situations where I'm choosing to be better, I'm choosing emotional intelligence, right? Like, because when I called my boss and was flipping out on the phone, that wasn't a choice. Well, I guess it was, but I chose violence, right? Like, I chose to lean into being emotionally reactive, right? Whereas now I can see people having emotional reactions. I can see people going off, feeling some type of way, being very angry, emotionally vomiting, like emoting on the outside, right? I can watch that happening and I can hold space for it, and I can sit there with it and just let it be. I don't have to respond at all. And like, the more I watch myself do that, the more I'm like, you're that girl. Like, you are that girl, because the cuss out was brewing. Like, it was brewing. The things that I was collecting up in my head to say to that person was fire. It was bars on bars. But it's like, again, I don't need to do that. I don't need to choose that. I'm choosing to represent myself in a way that stems that I can control myself. And Emotional intelligence is just that. It is controlling yourself, controlling your emotions, and also being aware that, like, yes, while I can cuss them out, do I need to hurt their feelings? Probably not, right? So remembering that you have a choice, I'm telling you, when you find yourself like not choosing violence, you're gonna feel good. But every now and then, hell, sometimes you just got to do it. Like, you just got to get that off, and you might feel bad about it, and you can repent, take it up with God. But I'm just saying, we all human. So every now and then, if that clapback comes out, it comes out. But just know that you can choose better next time. Okay. All right. So moving on. Number 4. This is one that again is a struggle for me because it is very others centered. But again, we're trying to be emotionally intelligent, and part of that is being others centered, right? And so with number 4, we want to acknowledge what people are saying. And what I mean by that is kind of like what I was talking about with my issue with communication, right? When I had a communication issue, I couldn't talk. So with not talking, I was also not validating other people's experiences, right? If someone's coming to me and telling me an experience that they're having, and I am too focused on what they're saying about me, or I'm too focused on how it's making me feel, then what I'm doing is robbing them of their due process, right? They deserve to be heard out. They deserve to be acknowledged, and they deserve to feel seen, right? And so that we don't seem defensive or uninterested when people are talking, right? Because we don't want people to feel like we don't care. We want to make people feel heard. Even if we don't know how to accept what they're saying, we still want to validate it, right? And so ways that you can do that is while someone's talking to you, while you're in the midst of conversation with someone, maybe about conflict, or they're sharing with you how you made them feel, great phrases to say are things like, I understand. Phrases like, I see. That helps the person feel like you're at least involved in the process, right? It's not saying that you have the answers, because maybe you don't, but by at least just acknowledging what the other person is experiencing, you're validating their truth. And that's very important for a healthy, mature conversation to take place. This is two people who are maybe on two separate ends of the stick, but we're still able to hold space for each other. We're still able to acknowledge each other's experiences because they're both different, right? And we want to be respectful to other people, and we want to have healthy communication, and we want to have the emotional intelligence to be able to say, this is not about me right now. This is about this other person and their experiences. My truth is still my truth, but I'm going to be able to listen and hold space for this person as well. And I'm telling you, when you do that, you feel good about yourself, because the other person is going to feel like, wow, okay, you're really listening to me, or you're validating me, and I want to work through this conflict with you. You see how that happens? You go from scared to prepared. All right. And so last thing on the list of things to do, the ways to grow when it comes to emotional intelligence, is be willing to be vulnerable and open, right? And now that's easier said than done. Like, I'm gonna just keep it a buck with you. Being vulnerable is something that is very hard. It's something that I struggle with often, because I have trust issues. I have a hard time feeling like I'm safe with certain people or in certain situations. But what I've had to learn is that when you're vulnerable and when you're open, it allows people to understand your experience, right? And so one of the things that really helps, I feel, when you're having like conflict resolution, and this is where emotional intelligence comes in, dealing with conflicts with people and resolving them, the ability to be vulnerable really helps the other person feel like, okay, we're connecting now. You're beyond listening, and now we're connecting. So like we said, with number 4, we're acknowledging what your experience is by saying things like, I see, by saying things like, I understand. Now with number 5 and being vulnerable, we're taking it a step further, and we're saying like, yeah, not only do I understand, but I've experienced something similar, and this is how it made me feel. So I do understand how you could feel the way that you do, right? And sometimes that's really hard when we're in conflict with people, because sometimes conflict makes it feel like it's me against you, right? And I can't necessarily make space for what you're saying, because I might not get my needs met, right? Or maybe it's not going to be resolved the way I want it to be resolved, right? And so by removing all of those layers and just simply focusing on your ability to be vulnerable, your ability to be open, you might create safe space within the conversation to where the other person now feels like, well, let me peel back a layer of my onion and show this person who I am as well. And so now, yeah, you have conflict, but you also have connection. And so when we have connection in our conflict, we're able to shift our priority, right? Like if you and I are experiencing a problem together and you bring your problem to me and you say, like, the other day when I was trying to have a conversation with you, I spoke to you about how XYZ makes me feel, and you kind of shut down. It really made me feel like this conversation wasn't important to you. And I know that's not how you feel, because sometimes I struggle speaking up as well, right? Sometimes I feel like if I say something, you're not going to like the way I said it, or you're going to get upset with me, and I get scared about how you're going to react. But I do want to be able to have these conversations with you, and I do want to be able to resolve conflict, but I want us to work through these things together. And so can you tell me more about how you feel when it's time to have difficult conversations so that I can understand you better? Come on. Did you hear that? Wouldn't you want to open up to somebody like that? I would want, boy, listen, that is holding space. That is conflict resolution. And I'm proud, baby, because that's how I approach. I try. Now, when I'm my best self, don't get me to lying. When I'm my best self, that's how I'm approaching situations, because I recognize that what I'm saying and how I'm behaving is affecting this experience. And that is the epitome of emotional intelligence. Do I have to respond the way that I want to respond? Or can I take a moment, be vulnerable, be open, and let this person see me without fearing that they're going to reject me, without fearing that they're going to leave me and abandon me? Because this is about my level of emotional intelligence, right? Now, if I free them in the process, or they're feeling like, okay, yeah, now I do want to be open, then great. Wonderful. We are now operating as healthy, effectively communicating adults, right? But without that emotional intelligence, we're missing the mark. We're missing the mark. And the priority becomes self again, right? So that brings me to the end of the 5 ways to develop emotional intelligence. And we're going to do a recap. So, number 1, practice observing how you feel. Hold space for yourself using meditation, breathwork, journaling, or yoga. Number 2, question your own opinions. All right. Challenge that noggin of yours. What are somebody else's thoughts? What do I like about that ideology? What do I accept about that ideology? What do I not accept about that ideology? There's a lot of different ways that we can open ourselves up to other people's truths, right? Number 3, remember that you always have a choice in every situation that you find yourself in. One thing that I love to ask myself is, how do I want to show up at this moment, right? Number 4, acknowledge what other people are saying. Know that it's not just about you, but it is about other people that are in your life and other people that you have relationships with. Their emotions matter just as much as yours, right? And lastly, number 5, be willing to be vulnerable and be willing to be open with others. Sharing your emotions can be very scary sometimes, but I promise you, the connections that you build with people around you, the people that you love, it's a beautiful experience, and it allows you to grow together, and it allows you to have strong relationships, right? And that's what we want. We want to be healthy. We don't want no drama, honey. I'm Mary J. Blige to the bullshit. We don't need no hateration, no holleration in this dancery, and we don't play that. So emotional intelligence is what we all need in order for us to get to that place within ourselves where we're unbothered. That's the real unbothered, emotional intelligence, okay? And so I hope this information has been helpful for you guys. This episode was a little longer than the other ones. I did not like the 24, 25 minutes. I felt like we needed to have some time to really expound on these topics. And so I hope that you're left with some information that's helpful for you to take out into the world and use so that you can evolve in your emotional intelligence and become that chick, that man, that whoever you are when it comes to resolving conflict and conquering challenges and having empathy towards others and communicating, right? Because those are all essential parts of life, and they enrich us greatly. So again, I hope that you've enjoyed this content, and I want to thank you for tuning in. If you have not, please leave us a review. We would love to hear your feedback. We would love to accept submissions for feedback on the podcast. Those things can be sent to thesoulgoodpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you are on Instagram, follow us. Our social media is at The Soul Good Podcast. I am your host, Brittany Rose, and you are listening to or watching The Soul Good Podcast. See you next week.